Hi all, I am Garg and I am a chartered accountant by profession. We have a small presentation for you to make you understand what is supply under model GST law. As you all know that under the new goods and service tax regime, what would going to be taxed is not the manufacturing activity, is not the sales activity, is not the service activity. Rather, what is going to be taxed is the supply. So it becomes very important to understand what is supply, and we have section 3 of model GST law which gives the meaning and scope of supply. So in this small presentation we're going to discuss section 3. So subsection 1, it says supply includes. So nowhere model GST law defines supply, defines the term supply. What it says supply includes. So what is given is the inclusive definition or inclusive meaning of supply, which is very wide and cover all forms of supply. So as per section 1, subsection 1, clause A, it says all forms of supply of goods and or services such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease or disposal made or agreed to be made for a consideration by a person in the course or furtherance of business. Friends, you will observe that this meaning is very wide. It covers almost everything. It starts with all forms of supplies, and then to clarify, it says it includes sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease or disposal. So one thing which is happening in this case, if you notice, is that in all these cases there is a movement from one place to another. There is a flow from one place to another. So when you talk about sales, so if I am selling you the goods are getting transferred to you, or the property and goods are getting transferred to you. When we talk about transfer, again something is getting transferred. When you talk about barter, I am giving you something and you are giving me something. Same thing with exchange. So broadly, under supply, if you want to see something falls under supply or not, we need to we can say if something is flowing from one point to another, it will fall under the meaning of supply. However, few important conditions we need to understand, or a supply needs to qualify in order to fall under subsection 1 of 3 would be, it should be made for consideration or agreed to be made for consideration. So if in the transaction consideration is missing, then it will not qualify as a supply. So this is the general rule. So it should be supply, it should be made for consideration or agreed to be made for consideration. See, the wordings are consideration and not money. Wordings are consideration, and consideration can include anything. This quid pro quo, what I am getting in return. So if I am giving you something, what I am getting in return. So whatever the return is, that will become the consideration. So if supply is for consideration, then only it will get covered within subsection 1. It further says by a person in the course or furtherance of business. So if something is not in the course or furtherance of business, it will not become supply. So two important conditions which we need to satisfy in order to fall a transaction within the meaning given under subsection 1 is that it should be made or agreed to be made for consideration. That consideration becomes very important. Second, it should be in the course or furtherance of business. So if these two conditions are not getting satisfied, then a supply in general will not be regarded as a supply which is getting covered under subsection 1. I will take an example of in the course or furtherance of business. For example, you are a chartered accountant, you have got a car with you, now you want to sell that car and buy a new car. So you are selling that car, let's say the selling old car to your friend. So this transaction of selling a car, or let's say this supply of selling a car, question comes whether it is in the course of furtherance of business. If it is your own personal car you are using for your own personal use, then selling a car is not your business. If selling a car is not your business, it will not qualify as supply in this subsection 1. But this is the general rule that we have discussed. So in under general rule, what will become a supply is supply for a consideration in the course of furtherance of business. Now let's see what are the exclusions to it. The first exclusion comes as importation of service for a consideration whether or not in the course of furtherance of business. Now when there is an importation of service, it only needs to satisfy one condition, that is it should be for a consideration. It did not satisfy second condition, that whether or not in the course of furtherance of business. So even if you're downloading a music from a web to to listen that music or to enjoy that music for your personal use, and you are paying some charges, let's say $1, $2, so it says importation of service for a consideration. So that will qualify as an importation of service for a consideration. However, you are not using it for the furtherance of business or in the course of business, it hardly matters. So when there is an importation of service, only and only we need to satisfy one condition, that is it should be for a consideration. If whether you use it for your own business purpose or for your personal enjoyment, it hardly matters. You want to build a house property in Delhi and you hire an architect from US, and that US architects provide you services. Now those services you will going to use for your own personal consumption, and you are not going to open any office there. So whether or not in the course of furtherance of business, it clearly says, so even the import of service for your personal consumption wherein you are paying consideration would going to become a chargeable supply, and one needs to pay a tax on it. Then there is an exclusion specifically given in Schedule 1. It says a supply specified in Schedule 1 made or agreed to be made without a consideration. So there could be certain transactions wherein even if you are not charging any amount, it will still qualify as a supply. So even if you are providing free without consideration, these transactions will become supply. Let's see. So this is the general rule that we have discussed, that essential condition for levying GST is that it should be supply, it should be in the course or furtherance of business, and then it should be for a consideration. Now let's move on to exclusion to general rule. Schedule 1, what it says any transaction, even if without consideration, that is permanent transfer, disposal of business asset wherein input tax credit has been availed on such asset. So let's say you are disposing certain assets, but you have claimed input tax credit on such assets when you bought them, then even this transaction, even the disposal of business asset without any consideration will qualify as a supply. You have a car, you are using that car for your business purpose, and you have taken the input credit. Now during the year you feel I need to donate this car to some poor farmers, so you do not donate this car to some poor guys in India. So however this donation or disposal of business asset, because you have used it for your business and you have claimed input tax credit on the same, it will qualify as a supply, and we need to value the transaction and pay taxes on the same. Second is supply of goods or services between related persons or between distinct persons as specified in section 10 when made in the course or furtherance of business. So if there is a transaction between two related persons or between distinct persons, that is wherein there is a one taxpayer and that taxpayer has got two entities, let's say one in Delhi, one in Mumbai, both are registered under GST and network, or both have got GST ID. So if there is a transaction between Delhi unit of the SSC and Mumbai unit of the SSC, it will qualify as a supply when made in the course or furtherance of business. So even if the transaction is happening between two related persons or between two units of, let's say, the same person, without any consideration, it will still qualify as supply. So question comes, how to value them? So we will have a separate video or a presentation for you on the valuation, but for now, if there is a transaction even without consideration, it will qualify as supply. So let's say you have got a related person in Bombay, you are a chartered accountant, and your brother-in-law is also a chartered accountant who is in Bombay, and you provide certain advice to your brother-in-law. So if brother-in-law is your related party, then certainly it will qualify as a transaction. Let's take another example. You have, instead of brother-in-law, you have a brother in Mumbai who is again a chartered accountant. He takes certain services from you. He asks, can you provide me opinion on a particular matter, or can you review my opinion? Now, being you are in Delhi, you provide certain advisory, or you review that opinion of your brother in Bombay. Now, this is a supply. Even if you are not charging any amount, it will still qualify as a supply, and one needs to pay taxes on the same. Another example could be, there are two units, Delhi, Mumbai, and Mumbai unit needs certain services, and Delhi provides certain services to the Mumbai unit, which could be of, let's say, the accounting services. So Delhi is doing accounting on behalf of Mumbai. The question comes, the accounting services which are provided by Delhi to Mumbai, even if Delhi is not charging anything, it will qualify as supply under this rule. Another exemption comes, or exclusion comes, supply of goods by a principal to his agent, where the agent undertakes to supply such goods on behalf of the principal. So if instead of directly supplying goods to the customer, principal supplies goods first to his agent, and then agent supplies goods to customer, then even this transaction could qualify as a supply. So principal supplies goods to an agent but not charges anything, and agent supplies goods to a customer. So even the supply from a principal to agent without consideration in this scenario will qualify as supply. Another exclusion is supply of goods by an agent to his principal, where the agent undertakes to receive such goods on behalf of the principal. It's wherein you have a procurement agent. So agent procures on your behalf, goods are lying with agent, and then agent supplies you the goods. So it will qualify as a supply even if agent is not charging anything for the supply, and you are making direct payment to the supplier. Next is importation of services by a taxable person from a related person or from any office other establishment outside India in the course or furtherance of business. So when we discussed in section 3 subsection 1 importation of services, it was not with regard to taxable person. So even if anyone importing the services for a consideration, it was qualifying as a supply. However, in this bullet, it needs to be, we need to remember that necessarily it needs to be by a taxable person. So if a taxable person importing a service from a related person or from any office other establishment outside India in the course of furtherance of business. So let's say there is a holding subsidiary company. So holding companies in United States and subsidiary companies in India. During the year, holding company provided certain services to Indian company, and US company, holding company is not charging any price or service fee from the Indian company. Then also, this transaction will qualify as a supply under the rules. So even if India is not paying any amount, then also it will qualify. So in these cases, which we discussed, that the disposable of assets, supply between related persons, supply of goods from principal to agent or agent to principal, and importation of services from a related person, even if no consideration is charged or paid, then also these transactions will qualify as a supply under section 3, and one needs to pay taxes on the same. Another exclusions are given in the schedule 3, which are when there is a service by an employee to employer, though there is a consideration, it is in the furtherance of business, but it will not qualify as a supply. Services by court or tribunal, functions performed by member of parliament, member of state, etc. Services by foreign diplomatic mission in India, services of funeral, burial, ceremonial, etc., etc. So if all these services are performed, then also it will not qualify as a supply. There are certain exclusions. Certain activities, transactions undertaken by central government, state government, or any local authority. So law also gives exemption to government, central government, and state government under certain cases wherein they are entering into certain transactions or activities, and those transactions or activities will not qualify as supply. So not on every service we need to pay taxes to the government. Hope you liked this small presentation on supply. Keep visiting our blog, and we will have more updated material for you. Thank you.